Well, he's done for this year.
This year's almost over.
I know they don't really say much about what happens next. They just say you're done for now, and you know, it seems like most of what's happening now is Air Force requirement, but there's still soldiers in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria.
Okay. Well, yeah, we need our soldiers to remain safe. All
And they
right.
should.
So, good morning, everybody. So, yesterday we left off with trying to figure out what a person owes a friend who didn't really set him up with a girl, but suggested a shidduch, gave him the phone number, and the rest was self-serve. Okay. But Rav Sharaga is still of the opinion that if a person does something to facilitate a marriage, he still, even though he hasn't done an official brokerage and he's not an official broker, he's not an official shadchan, he's still entitled. So, like we learned yesterday, even if a person never signed a contract saying that he would pay for shatchanus for someone who sets him up, mikol makom kevin shuhu modeh shuhu shidech lo otivech lo, but if he acknowledges that it's because of you that I was able to meet this girl, chayev l'shalim, he has to pay. V'lo tzarich shum chatima b'shum kinyan, and therefore there's no signatures that are required. There's no kinyan that's required. Kimavur b'Mordechai, just like the Mordechai writes in a similar case, the Reuven shetova mishim and asara zehuvim babur sheyadaber lavel hasar. Reuven tells Shimon that I need you to pay me 10 gold pieces if you want me to speak to the government official on your behalf. The Shimon hiskim l'shalim lo, and Shimon said, I will. The acharei shediber im hasar Shimon siriv l'shalem lo, and then after Reuven does the work, Shimon refuses to pay him under the pretense of what? Me'achar v'lo haya kan shum kinyan, because he says there was never any kinyan. We never shook hands on it. We never signed any papers. I never made a kinyan with you. That's irrelevant. When services are rendered, the service itself is the surrogate for a kinyan. The chayev l'shalem lo kevin sheish lo din poel upoel lo tzarech kinyan. A worker does not require a kinyan. The fact that I'm rendering service for you, whether I'm doing manual labor or whether I'm just making a phone call on your behalf, is in and of itself considered to be a work product, and the work itself that I provide on your behalf is the substitute for a kinyan. So, a lawyer may provide services, and it may even just involve him making a phone call, but he's entitled to charge for that. And that's what lawyers do all the time. They charge for
emails
or emails, yeah, or
Marv just can't charge us for all the wisdom he provides us this morning.
That's right. Mark, we get so much wisdom for free.
There's a firm downtown called Stikeman Elliott, famous tax firm. One of the big ones
Yes.
forever. The guy named Stikeman used to work at and wrote the Tax Act.
Yeah.
Okay, it's before when he's a young guy or whatever, he works there 30 years. So he goes into private practice, starts his firm, and one of his big corporate clients calls in a big panic one day, and he says, Mr. Stikeman, he says, I've just been assessed $1 million. Can you do this? Come on in. So he comes in, and we talk about a phone call. He says, he looks at the whole case, whatever, he phones the guy at the CRA who's on the file, and he says, Bob, he says, I got this guy here, whatever. He says, what can you do for me? Blah, blah, blah. Hands up the phone. He says, so what happened? He says, I've got your notice of assessment reduced to $100,000. He goes, wow, that's amazing. One phone call? He says, what do I owe you? He says, $100,000. He goes, what? You spent 2 seconds on it. He says, yeah, but I reduced it from $1 million to 100,000. He says, I'm not paying that. So he goes, you want me to call him back?
That's great.
He's talking about a phone call, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's over 100,000.
Sure, it can be, yeah,
Right?
absolutely,
That's the point.
absolutely, right.
It's not time to Chick Floyd's.
I don't know if it's true or not, but that's like the story out there.
Okay. All right, so therefore, so we're good, this is where we were up to yesterday. Va'afal pi shahativuch nasa b'dibur bilvad lelo tircha ulelo hotzaot velo hefsed zman. So even though the brokerage of this shidduch was done just through words, without a lot of physical exertion, without any expense, without a lot of time taken, like that phone call, b'chol zos chayav l'shalim lo et melos scharo. You still have to pay him his full what a regular shadchan would get for providing that service. Me'achar ve'asat hashiduch l'siviut ritzono lelohit arvut shadchanim acherin, because you successfully brokered a shidduch to everyone's satisfaction without having to get other shadchanim involved. Aval im hu lo siyem et hamelacha v'hayetzorech b'hitarvut mitavechim acherim ligmor et ha'iska. The only issue that we'd have to deal with is that, let's say, the first shadchan did not completely close the circle. In other words, he did a certain amount of the work, but we needed to get other people involved in order to go to the other side and to negotiate and things like that. Azai l'shadchan harishon magia lishlish, u'l'sha'ar hamitavechim shegamru et hashiduch magia shenei shlish. So then the first shadchan is entitled to 1/3 of the shadchanis fee, and the other parties who seal the deal are entitled to 2/3 of the shadchanis.
Is that the rule of thumb, or that's what you propose?
That's the rule of thumb. Now, where does this come from, this rule of thumb? That the first broker gets 1/3 and the people who actually seal the deal get to get the 2/3. What is the source of this? Because this is the first time we're seeing this. So the Makor Baruch just very tersely says, Ayin bepischei tshuva, shehevi b'shem ha'ateret tzvi v'shut shev Yaakov, dahamin hagu l'shalem l'matchil shalish. V'chein katav b'shut maharshag. And I'm not familiar with the shut maharshag, but we can certainly take a look at the pischei tshuva. So it's in Siman Kuf Pei Hey Sif Katan Gimel. I think it's worth looking at that because it's really the source of this concept. Person who suggests the shidduch versus the person who does a lot of the legwork, okay? Kuf Pei Hey Sif Katan Gimel. So, let's see here. Just give me 1 sec. So, let's see. Okay, so we go into Shulchan Aruch. Kuf Pei Hey, right? That's what we said. Put this down. Put this up. Kuf Pei Hey, Hilchos Shluchin. Okay. So here's the chapter. It's talking about shlichus, and let's see, the commentaries are the Pischei Tshuva. It doesn't have Pischei Tshuva here on this list. Let me just look up Pischei Tshuva. Catalog. Showing you all of my tricks here. Okay, Choshen Mishpat. Kuf Pei Hey. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at the original source. The original source is in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Kuf Pei Hey. Hold on. Where's the Pischei Tshuva? The Achar Kach Machru Levi Al Yedei Acher. So where does this occur? Let's try another one. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong spot. Okay, so let's take a look. Here it is. It's in the Shulchan Aruch over here. Okay. So here it is. This is Kol Sir Sur. Shehodia Lokeach Shechefet Ze O Karka Ze Shel Reuven. Here, let me just share the screen with those who are online so that you can see this as well. Here we go. Kol Sir Sur, any agent or broker, it's really a Sir Sur is a broker. Shehodia Lokeach, that notified a buyer, Shechefet Ze O Karka Ze Shel Reuven. He tells him this property that you're interested in belongs to Reuven. And then after the buyer purchases it from the agent, the seller says, I've decided not to sell it for that price. Then the sale can be voided. Because the seller never agreed on a price. In other words, we're talking about a case where the seller hires an agent to sell the property for him, doesn't stipulate a price. The broker is able to get a price agreed upon. The buyer brings it back to the seller. The seller can says, no, that's too low. And so the Ramah says, V'yesh omrim dafka shelo omer lo klum b'shashi hivkido. But that's only, so the Ramah says that's only if he said nothing at the time when he appointed him as his broker. He just said, sell the property. Aval omer lo mechor b'meshetimtza, but if he said, sell it for whatever you can get for it, if he said that language, lo yuchal hamocher lachzor bo, umasha asa hasir sur asa, then the seller cannot back out of the deal. Now, next halacha that the Ramah brings. Ruvain hayelo bayit limkor. Ruvain has a house he wants to put up for sale. Uba Shimon v'sir ser l'machor l'levi. And Shimon comes along as an agent or a broker, and he says, I represent Levi who would like to buy your house. Va'amar Ruvain shalevi sono ve'enu rotza limkor lo. And Ruvain, the owner, says, I can't stand Levi. He's an obnoxious person, and I'm not going to sell him my house. Ve'achar kein machor l'levi al yedei acher. And then, but then he ends up, so Shimon walks out, and then Ruvain ends up selling it to Levi via a different broker, Yehuda. So the halacha is chayav litain l'Shimon sar saruto. Then Ruvain has to pay a brokerage fee to the original broker Shimon. So in other words, if a guy comes to you for a sale, he has an opportunity, he found a buyer for you, and you said, nah, I don't want to sell it to him. And then you change your mind, but you end up using a different broker. This happens in real estate all the time. So then you have to, by law, by halacha, you have to pay a brokerage fee to the original broker. You can't just say, well, I've chosen to use a different realtor. If one realtor brings you a deal, and then you decide, oh, I'm going to go through my own realtor, so then that's a serious problem that's a breach of ethics and a breach of halacha. You have to pay a brokerage fee to the original guy. So this is an interesting halacha that has a lot of ramifications. I know that a friendship was broken over the following case, that a woman recommended a shidduch for a young man to a young lady, and the young lady said, okay, we're interested, but then got a call from another woman who said, I represent the family of this young man, and I'm going to be managing the the go-between, between the young man and the young woman. So the first woman was very upset because she felt that she was the one who had brought this to the table. And the mother of the girl said it wasn't my choosing. In other words, it was the other family who said, we're dealing with this other woman who's acting as the broker. So who's obligated to pay so when it comes to paying the shadchanis fee, so who gets what? In other words, it would seem that the first person who brought this up should get some kind of brokerage fee. So where does the 1/3 come from? So this is where the Pischei Tshuva comes into play, and this is what we're going to see now.
So wouldn't they have been advised though in this situation? Because if you know about it, then they came to a Rav and put the Shaila there, so they didn't have to have this machloket. They could have just gone by the halakha.
Well, actually, what ended up turning out is that the boy and girl did not end up moving forward, but the bad feelings were generated nonetheless, and it created hard feelings. Okay. If the shidduch would have gone through, then the shaila would have started, right? But the shaila never came to a halachic shaila. It's unfortunate that feelings were hurt. Got to be very careful about it, especially with women. You got to be so careful. Anyway, ayin b'tshuvas noda b'Yehuda tinyana siman lamed vav. So the noda b'Yehuda, who's Rabbi Yecheskel Landau of the 18th century, shekas of the b'tshuvas harash makor haidina lo huskar shemach al yedei acher. He says that the rush is the origin of this halacha, where you've got to pay the original broker. He doesn't mention that you ended up selling it through another party, another broker. Rak mavur sham shemachor achakach levi al yidei atzma. But the case that the rush brings is that Shimon presents to you a prospect that I have a buyer, Levi. And Reuven says, no, thank you, I'm not interested. He then calls up Levi himself and says, I can save us the brokerage fee. I'll just sell it to you myself. And you and I can split the difference of what we would have had to pay the broker. And I'm sure that happens a lot also. All the time, right? And these are legal cases that can... Yeah, okay. So, Ume'ata, Masha Hosif Rama al Yedei Acher Yesh Ladun al Zeh. So the Ramah adds an extra feature to the case, which is that there is a second broker. So he says we have to deliberate over this. The bishlama im machro achar kach levi below shum sirsur, in the case that the rush actually brings, where Reuven just cuts out Shimon entirely and sells it directly to Levi, shaper muchach de baramos de chol lahasirsur. Then it's clear that there was some kind of deceit that was practiced in that situation, because he only found out that Levi was interested in the house because of Shimon's intervention, and he's basically trying to cut Shimon out of his feet. Aval imachro acher kach al yedei sirsur acher yuchal lihiyot shahasirsur hachadash hitim lo te'amim nechonim shelo ya'akev hamecher avur hasina. But the Pischei Tshuva argues, or quoting the note of Yehuda, he says, hold on a second. Let's say Yehuda, okay, so Reuven is approached by Shimon. Shimon says, I have a buyer, Levi. Reuven says, I can't stand Levi. And it's true, he hates his guts. So Shimon says, okay, if you change your mind, let me know. He doesn't do the hard sell. Next day, he gets a call from Yehuda. And Yehuda calls him up and says, do you know Levi's really interested in buying your house? And Reuven says, yeah, I already heard about that. I can't stand the guy. Yehuda says, let's sit down over a cup of coffee. Let me tell you why you should sell your house to Levi. And he goes through, gives him 5 good reasons why, despite the fact that he can't stand Levi's guts, he should still sell him the house. And the reason number 1 is he's paying $1 million over list price. The second reason is he's paying $1 million over list price. Okay, right. All right. And so in other words, you've got every good reason, and he sweetens the pot, basically. And instead of Shimon, who just really just did a soft pedal and was not like a really good salesman, Yehuda really knew how to use his words in order to convince Reuven to sell. So he says, in that kind of situation, so he says, it's not so simple that Reuven is acting in bad faith by changing his mind and choosing to sell to Levi via Yehuda versus Shimon. He says, "Va'al kol panim nira shegam Ramah shekasav shemacha yedei acher chayiv litain l'Shimon sar saruso kavanoso kefi chelko." So it therefore seems quite clear that when the Ramah says that you have to pay Shimon, it doesn't mean you have to pay Shimon a full brokerage fee. It means you have to pay him a portion of the brokerage fee because he started. Shelo tomar kevin shemitechila lo nichnasu divrei hasirser ba'oznei hasocher shuv ein lo shum zechut. He says, and the point that the Ramah is making is that just because Reuven wasn't interested after hearing Shimon's offer, therefore Shimon is completely out of the picture and he has no rights. Kamash malan shaloi beid zchuto. The Ramah is saying, no, Shimon still, he brought the idea forward, and therefore he's entitled to something. Avol vadai shegam hasheni hu shutaf b'sar sarut hazeh. But certainly Yehuda, who was able to close the deal, you got your guy who's what's the initial person? This is the starter, and then you have the closer. And the closer is the more crucial part of the deal, right? So he says, it's certainly Yehuda, the closer, is entitled to his brokerage as well. Now, v'im yiton hasir so harishon ala mocher shegam ba'oto pam hayita merutza v'udechitani lomar shein charotz limkar levi kidei lahapsideni. Maybe you'll argue that Shimon, the first broker, could say, hey, Reuven, you really would have sold it to Levi through me, but you just didn't want to pay me my brokerage fee because you just weren't interested in paying the brokerage fee. And you figured you have your brother-in-law who's a broker, so you'll bring him into the deal and you'll use him instead. He says that's not enough to give Shimon the entire brokerage fee, and that's not enough to obligate Reuven, the seller, to even take a shvua that he had no malevolent objectives. Kevin she'ena omer bazet tainus bari, because Shimon, where's your proof? Like, how do you know that was the intention? Because Reuven could say, I just changed my mind. Yeah. In other words, you have to know for a fact, if you can produce evidence that, let's say someone tapped Reuven's phone and he heard a conversation between himself and his brother-in-law, Yehuda, said, listen, if Levi's willing to spend that kind of money, I'm happy to sell it to him, but I figured, why should I use Shimon? I have a brother-in-law in the business. I would rather give you the business, right? So in that situation, Shimon could sue for the entire amount because he's really, that's already deceit to cut Shimon out of the deal to give preferential treatment to another broker for whatever reason. But if Shimon doesn't have that evidence, right? So then Reuven could say, what are you talking about? It's not that I didn't want to use you as a broker. I would have used you as much as I would have used Yehuda. But when Yehuda presented to me the argument, he's the closer. And when you presented to me, I wasn't interested. But when Yehuda presented it to me, he was able to convince me that it's in my best interest to sell it to Levi, and that's why. Vegamim haita kavana biramos. And furthermore, he says, even if there was some deceit involved, gam kein ani mesupak im chayav hamocher lahashlim l'sirsur harishon hahefsed shegaram lo. It's not clear to me, even if it's clear that Reuven and Yehuda colluded to cut Shimon out of the deal, it's not clear to me that Shimon would be entitled to a full brokerage fee in that case. V'yoter karov be'enai shepater ad kan devarav. And it seems more to me that even in a case where you have evidence that Reuven intended to cut Shimon out of the deal, Shimon would still not be entitled to a full brokerage fee because he didn't do the full act of brokering. He would only be entitled to a portion. The kosav od sham bidvar shadchan. The next thing that the Noda Behuda talks about is regarding a shadchan. Shedacha habal daber oto v'lakach shadchan acher ligmor hashiduch. That the father of the girl, it seems, or maybe the father of the boy, it's not clear, basically dismissed the first shadchan and says, listen, I don't think I'm going to go ahead with this shidduch. Thank you very much. Our business is done. He then calls up another shadchan and says, I'd like you to finish the work. And for whatever reason, he wasn't happy with the first shadchan. He liked the proposal, but for whatever reason, he decided to work with a different shadchan. Hadavar yadua shehefresh gadol yesh ben shidduch lameka. So first of all, let's clarify. Everyone knows that there's a big difference between the sale of property and making a shidduch. Ki be'esak hamekach ein sham dvarim emtsaim, the hamekach talui rak bedamim. He says when you sell a property, there's not a lot of brokering that needs to be done other than haggling over the price.
Yeah, it sells itself.
It's in other words, you don't need a lot of TLC.
Right.
In the same way that you need for a shidduch, which requires a lot of sensitivity and a lot of, I understand how you feel, and well, maybe he didn't mean that when he said that, and maybe you should interpret it this way, and the keven shahasir serhevi otam le'emek hashaveh b'sach adamim kvar nigmar hadavar v'lo chaser rak hakinyan. So once a broker is able to get two parties on a sale of a house to agree on a price, so that's already, the hard work has been done, and all you need now is a kinyan. So to at that point, to dump the first broker and go to another broker to close the deal would be a treacherous thing to do. V'lachein im hamocher dechol lahasirsur b'dvarim ve'achar kach ichnis od sirsur bazen istabakti tzad im ramot hazem mechayev lahamocher l'shalem l'sirsur harishon hefseda. That's why I have this doubt as to whether in a situation of a sale of a property where Shimon brings the deal and he says, Levi is your buyer and he's offering this amount of money. And then Reuven shuts it down and he says, no, thank you, I'm not interested. And then he goes through Yehuda and sells it for the exact same price. There, I'm not sure whether Shimon is entitled to the full brokerage fee or not, because there seems to have been some kind of deceit. Aval b'shiduchim yesh harbe pratim levad sachanadan. So, but when it comes to shiduchim, there's a lot more work that has to be put into creating the deal. Okay, he says it's more than just how much dowry is the father of the bride going to be bringing into the marriage. How many years is he going to be willing to support the guy in Kolel or whatever the arrangement is? Kimohit chayvut mizonot v'dira uvgadim umatanot. He says there are other details. There's whether he's going to be feeding the kids. Is he going to be taking them on a cruise every Pesach? What about the domicile? Is he going to purchase it? Is he just going to be renting it? What about clothing? Is he going to provide the girl and the boy with a new wardrobe every Yontif? Right? In other words, and these are, by the way, these are real issues that exist in certain communities even to this day. Not so much in more modern Orthodox communities, but in the more yeshivish communities, a lot of these details have to be worked out very, very carefully, barachel bitcha haktana, like down to the very granular details. The kame pa'amim bishvil davar katan mitparedet hachavila v'nitbatel hashiduch, and quite often there might just be one thing out of place, and that's enough to destroy the whole shidduch. And especially, and by the way, it's true in modern times, even in more modern circles, where there's the concern that there's a concern that, the shadchan may not be skilled in, like I mentioned before, in trying to convince the boy or the girl that this is really your match. Okay, and that's why one family or both families may want to use a different shadchan who they feel is more adept at speaking and has a greater skill of being convincing and so forth. ולכן כל זמן שלא השווה אותם השדכן הראשון בכל הפרטים, עד שלא נשאר שום דבר גדול או קטן שצריך לדבר בזה, עדיין לא נגמר השידוך על ידי השדכן. And therefore, clearly in cases of shiduchim, you cannot say that, oh, the first shadchan brought everything to the table, so it's no fair that they ended up using a second shadchan. Quite often, a second shadchan is necessary in order to work out some of the more delicate issues. And therefore, in that kind of situation, if one of the sides says, I'd like my friend so-and-so to be the closer on the shidduch, afilu haya biyacholet shel hashadchan harishon lahashvotam gamkein biprotim halalu ein kan ramaut klal. Then even if the first shadchan was perfectly capable of closing the deal himself or herself, there's no deceit involved, at least, because nasu masim b'cholet, and these kinds of things happen all the time. Ve'ein lahashadchan harishon al hatzdadim rak tar umot, and the first shadchan can only say, I have a grievance against you, but there's no financial claim that he can make. We still haven't gotten to the 1/3 part. We're going to hold on to this. We're going to continue this Be'ezrat Hashem tomorrow morning.
There's no splitting here, the way he's talking.
So far, we haven't seen about fee splitting, but we will get there. We will get there, Hal. Okay, this is a fascinating tshuva. Okay.
The true love. You know, to let these little details.
True love. For 25 years, I've washed your clothes. Da, 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 da.
We're learning, you know, it's a hug tomorrow.
So are we on tomorrow? I'm okay. I'm perfectly fine. I'm good. So Wayne, are you, because Jerusalem, it's Christmas. Are you still with us tomorrow?
I'm sure I can squeeze it in.
Yeah.
And Thursday's a hug too.
Okay, so Bezrat Hashem will be on tomorrow and Thursday.
Don't forget I'm in Jerusalem. We don't see much Christmas unless you're in the Christian quarter.
There you go. There you go. Okay. All right. We'll see you soon.